Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefuehl and welcome to the brand new Corsa E. We've come just outside Berlin today to take a closer look. Now, if you haven't yet had the chance to see AJ's review of the full lineup of Corsas, go and check that out. Today, we're just going to be concentrating on this. Well, it has taken 38 years and 14 million cars sold to get to this point. This is the first Opel to have been made in conjunction with PSA, and it shares the CMP platform with the new 208. So, is it going to be significantly different? Well, from a design perspective, right from the get-go, you can see that there are clearly some pretty striking differences here. Now, I think a lot had to be done in the redesign of the Corsa to make it fresh, more sporty, more agile in terms of its appearance. You may have already seen a lot of that stuff through the earlier launches with AJ, especially if you've watched that clip. But the most striking thing about the way that this car represents visually is that it very much wants to make a statement that it's separate and different from what's gone before. And that's really in keeping with this introduction as the first fully electric car from Opel. So, what you find is that although there are some familiar looking Opel design characteristics, out has gone the older, rounder feel, and in comes a more sporty, svelte, angular design. But don't worry, for those traditionalists, there's still a lot of that Corsa roundness to look at and love. The first really noticeable characteristic here is what they call the compass line, and that's the crease in the bonnet that comes right through the middle and goes right into the logo here, that's then contrasted with these horizontal lines here. Those cut straight into these now standardly LED lights, and what's quite unusual for a vehicle in this class is you can now get them for the first time ever optionally as full matrix LEDs. So is that worth spending the extra money on? Of course, Opel says yes, but what do you think? 4 meters 6 in length or 160 inches. The most distinctive features of this car that make it stand out are the very thing that very few features make this car stand out as the fully electric model. What I mean by that is that Opel made a very strong design decision when they decided to launch their first fully electric car that it should look and feel very similar to the rest of the internal combustion engine lineup. Why would they do that? Well, research told them that what people liked now as we move into future generations is not to stand out from the crowd. They want to feel that they're having a car that exists well within its own right as part of the lineup instead of being distinct from it. So you could be forgiven from just taking a casual look at this car for thinking it's exactly the same as the rest of the Corsas, and that's very intentional. But there are two key design features here just to let you know that it is the electric model, and I think those are worth pointing out. The first is these wheels. These are specially designed to be maximally efficient. They're 17 inches and they're as aerodynamic as it's possible to make them. The other, and it's even more subtle, is this small E-badge right on the side. Well, let's talk about the design itself. I find this a really interesting statement. In a world where SUVs are becoming more and more predominant all the time, it's harder and harder to make the argument for small cars or lower cars in the traditional segments. So there is a way around that, and that's to visually cheat by giving small cars big visual presence, so they look a little SUV-like whilst they still maintain all the advantages of still being small cars. So look at this. A high shoulder line and a really wide, big statement of a flank, whilst this contrasting black roof means that the car has a very strong lower presence and really not much on top at all. Now, what's even more interesting about that is because of the use and integration of the new chassis, this car has dropped 4 almost 5 centimeters off the height of its predecessor. That's just how much of an impact the new chassis has had on how this car's design works. And don't forget, this has to make space for all of the batteries that are fitted into it as well. So for this to present visually on the road exactly the same way its internal combustion engine twins do, that's really quite an impressive achievement. Let's not forget, standardly, this car should come in with a standard petrol engine at around about 1,000 kilograms. This car with its batteries is packing in around about 1,500 kilograms. So presenting all of that in a way that doesn't make it look as if it's carrying that weight is really quite a neat engineering trick. Needless to say, a lot's happened in terms of the suspension and the stiffness of the chassis in order to make that achievable. But visually speaking, what you're looking at is a small car with a big, bold statement. I like it. I think it's good. If you're going to be in the small car sector, I think making a strong statement right out of the gate is important. So it speaks to me. It works for me. But what do you think? Round at the back of the car, and it's always going to be a bit of a challenge for designers of small vehicles. Here you get the distinct impression that somebody said to them, go big or go home. So they went big. As you can see, the lower third of design here is absolutely visually massive. And as with the side, but even more accentuated, the top half, because of this contrasting colour, almost disappears. So what you see is this massive wedge of bumper. And visually, that's kind of a neat trick. Usually, the rear entrance on the boot of a hatchback can often be very compromised in terms of space. Can make the car look a little bit mean and small. So in order to get round that, so your focus isn't on this small load area, this massive bumper down here really pulls your eye into the solidity of the car, making it seem a lot bigger than it actually is. Now, of course, with this being the fully electric model, we don't have any exhaust pipes down here at all. And I think that's visually really interesting because in much the same way that many modern cars use fake exhausts because it's a design detail that people just instinctively like, I feel on electric vehicles there's something lacking there at the bottom. Clearly, it would be ridiculous to put fake exhausts on, but in terms of a new piece of design language that would take over the visual function that they support, I'm really interested to see what manufacturers will do with this visual area further down the road. For now, for me, it's just a detail that's lacking. I'm not quite sure what should replace it, but I think there's an opportunity here for something else to come. In the meantime, it's big, it's bold. Opel, I have never liked your prominent badges at the rear, but that's my personal taste. They are clean, they are straightforward. So I think it all ties together and works well. I like that it's making a strong statement. And you know what? It is definitely still an Opel. Does it work for you? One of the things I really like about the idea of this car sharing a platform with its internal combustion engine brothers is that you look for all of those features that are particularly distinctive to the standard car and then see how they've been utilized on the electric model. So of course, what would be the petrol filler cap is right here. Now, I did mention that there were only a couple of very slight differences here. There's one that I haven't mentioned yet, which only the very sharpest of eyed people will have noticed. And frankly, if you tell me you did, then I'm going to call you a liar. And that is, in order to accommodate all of the extra weight, this car has a wider track width by 12 millimeters than the standard. And it also has a longer wheelbase by 7 millimeters. So almost too small to mention, but that makes a significant difference in terms of the handling, and you need those changes to accommodate all of that extra weight. Well, back here to the charging point, which is of course where we are putting in the fuel for this car. Now, interestingly, we don't only have AC charging available, but if you have a look down below, there is a DC charging point as well. Now, if you're not familiar, AC is for the slower charging and the DC is for the fast charging that you're now being made aware is available all over the place. Why does that exist? What's the significance? Well, in very simple terms, the AC charge point on a vehicle standardly uses the car's built-in charger. So that is that the current runs directly into the car and the car then handles it. The DC charger is only taking the raw power. That's all having the work done for it by the charger itself. So that's why that's not something you're very likely to have at home. But it's also what makes the difference between a wall socket standardly not being able to provide your car with terribly fast power, but this being able to reach a very large percentage of maximum fullness off a fast charger within about 20 minutes. Honestly, having used all of the systems, I can say that for my choice, you're going to find life a lot less stressful if you just worry about standardly where you're using the AC charging capacity. The DC fast charging stuff is really amazing and it works well, but unless you know your plans well enough to get properly hooked into a network and set up, they can be a little cost prohibitive. I have to tell you, the last time I did a long distance drive in an electric car for a cost comparison, and I did use fast charging points, then I found that at the end it would have been cheaper to have taken a diesel. Ouch. So that's worth bearing in mind. It really is not usually an issue, and what I really like is that that facility is available for you in a pinch if you find yourself in need. It's really nice to have the flexibility of both of those options available to you on this car. Now let's take a look at the interior and see what the car does for us. Well, first thing to mention is, of course, the key. It's a pretty standard affair, but it's nice in the hand, and I think you'll be perfectly happy with that. As we open the car door, I think the first two things that immediately occur to me are, one, I really like the matching of materials that have been used in this car. It is obviously a cheaper, smaller car, but they've used the materials to their best effect to not make it look or feel cheap. Now, I understand that the cost for the electric one doesn't make it a cheap vehicle, but you have to price compare at the price point of the internal combustion engine, given that that is still the largest segment that's going to be selling for this car, at least to start with. One of the things I've been really impressed with from Opel is the idea that when they considered how to put together the production of this vehicle, it's incredibly flexible and responsive. One of the really big advantages of having all of the cars operate on the same platform is that if it's slow to start with the electric, that's okay. They can ramp up production on their internal combustion engines, but as the switches take place, they can change the way that their manufacturing plants operate. So in theory, it should be pretty fluid. That percentage can increase gradually over time, and then the percentage of cars that are coming out fully electric can expand over time without the need for significant retooling or redesign. So that means a lot of uniformity. And as you can see, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Right from the get-go, nice use of materials here, nicely finished, nicely designed. And this is always a must-have for me. I understand small cars are limited in space, but I really do need to feel that I can at least fit a decent sized bottle somewhere in it, so it's always good when I find I've got a home for my water bottle. Now, Opel have made a lot of noise about the redesign of their seats, and I have to say at first glance they look pretty great. I like the sporty feeling that you get from looking at them. There's not too much designing, you don't feel they're overdone for the car. It certainly isn't a case of thinking, well, I think they're overselling it a little bit. They look really comfortable, they look really stylish, and they match the nice new interior too. But are they any comfort to sit in? Let's find out. Manual controls here down the side for the seat make it a lot faster to access and just immediately put where you want it. Honestly, a lot of the time I think electric seats are completely wasted in smaller vehicles. They're really complicated, they're really slow and not responsive, and in a small car with different drivers, you need to be able to make those adjustments quickly. So, thumbs up for that from me. The seat itself, yes, it's really comfortable. Now, obviously, we won't find out about that properly till we take it out and have a drive. But I'm very happy with what's been achieved here. So often, small cars are ruined because everything's great about them except for the seat. This feels brilliantly supportive. The road position is very nice indeed. I'm 1 meter 78 or 5'10", but I do have a particularly long torso. And if you look at my head, there is oodles of space above it here. So you could be very comfortable in this car. I'm guessing anywhere up to about 6'3". And for a small car, and don't forget, it's 5 centimeters less in height than its predecessor. That's really a huge achievement. Well, that's all the good. Now let's take a look at a couple of things that maybe I'm not quite as impressed with. I feel like what I'm about to say could be quite controversial, so please bear in mind this is just my opinion, and I'm really keen to hear if you disagree. Well, let's start off by saying that clearly Peugeot and Opel are very different companies. They have very different histories, very different approaches, and very different cultures. So I wasn't really expecting to see the Peugeot 208 when I sat inside this car. But don't forget, they do have the same parent company and they are sharing now a lot of the same technology, including this platform. Therefore, I was excited to see what Opel would do with this opportunity after I'd seen quite how much and quite how radical what Peugeot had done with their version, the 208, had achieved. So, I'm a little disappointed. Holds in order to make space for criticism. Take a look. If you bear in mind just quite how radical what Peugeot did with the 208 was, I think I can be forgiven for expecting something that would pop and resonate just a little bit more than this. If you have a look at the driver's display, for example, so you can see we have massive wasted dead zones at either side. Now, whilst that makes total sense from an economic standpoint, and the more you go off campus in terms of making something that's original and that's unique to the car, the more expensive it gets. This clearly is a standard stock item screen that has been fitted to the car. It's just that Peugeot achieved so much with their new virtual cockpit. So when I look at this, I think, I don't know. But then maybe the software will delight me when I turn the car on. Let's do it and find out. And the answer is no, not particularly. It looks like an interface for an app rather than a driver's display. Now, although I can change the way that the information is displayed on there, there's not really a huge amount that I can do to change the display itself. It does give me lots of information, which in an electric car is obviously always useful. This just isn't what I'm used to interacting with in a car. So for my taste, that is a real no. Honestly, I would rather have kept the digital information on the infotainment and maybe even just have gone back to analog dials for the driver display. But that really is a taste thing. So if you disagree with me, please feel free to say so in the comments. I'm genuinely keen to hear your opinion. And here we can see how this has been much more naturally integrated into the design of the car. This feels intentional and as if it's supposed to be there, and I like this mixture of these traditional buttons featuring as well with this touchscreen. But I have to tell you, it's not the most responsive system, and when you actually get into using it, a lot of times you just wonder, why on a car of this age and type is this not more responsive? I might be being really, really unfair there, but as I said, I do have something that works really well to compare it to. I like the matte finish here. It feels tactile and it makes it much easier to navigate. It's also much more pleasing to be able to get some traction and not leave big greasy fingerprints all over your display. I can't say I'm as excited about this piano black, but at least they've used a good high gloss plastic that doesn't easily show up fingerprints. So that should take you a while longer before you find yourself needing to clean it. It's not that I think that this driver's setup isn't good, it's just that it's not bowling me over with any new innovation or new ideas. And although the steering wheel itself is excellent, these drivers' features here are not the most intuitive to use. They don't feel as natural to the hand as many other manufacturers. It's not a particular sticking point. If you own this car, you'll use it day in, day out, which means you'll get used to this very quickly indeed. But in terms of its ability to wow you right off the bat, well, I think you're going to want to spend more time focusing on the drive and less focusing on how this interacts. That said, thumbs up for the steering wheel. It feels great. It's the right size. It's nicely put together and it feels really good and solid. The driver's experience overall is very pleasing. The information is presented at the right height, the right angle, there's the right amount of it, and there's a very good mix between digital and analog. So everything is pretty easy to interact with and fairly pleasing. The aesthetic looks nice. This use of material here, for example, and these styling line details do resonate with a feeling of quality, and that's going to make you feel happy about your purchase. Really, I think my gripe is primarily driven by functionality, usability, and your feeling of working with this product. But that might all just be me. Slightly further down, and we have our heating and cooling controls just here, nicely tucked away but easily accessible. Then we have an inductive charging pad immediately built into the central console with a USB charge point and a 12-volt charge point. So lots of opportunity to charge up devices or connect them. This has Android Auto baked into it, which is obviously pretty handy. Further back, well, new feature for this car, not only does it have lane assist, but you can also set the exact distance between the lines that you want to keep. So if you want to hold closer to the right or closer to the left, you simply put the car where it needs to be, switch on the function, and then the car, in principle at least, provided where you live the road painters do a good job, will stay exactly relatively within the lane where it was. Further back, well, we know this very well. This is the automatic gear selector. It's very comfortable in the hand, very easy to use, very straightforward. This dictates how much regeneration the engine does while we're driving it. So as you'll be familiar with electric cars that have gone before, that's basically where the car is using the energy when you take your foot off the accelerator to recharge the battery. D is the first state. B is the one that maximizes the regeneration that's happening. And a drive mode selector. That changes the way the steering handles, it changes the pedal mapping, and it makes the power more immediate and accessible if you go with the sporty mode. Obviously, normal is normal, and then it has an eco mode to maximize your efficiency on the use of the car. Further back still, and you can see some of what you would expect from what I would call small car compromise, and this is basically where money dictates effect. But they've done a nice job here. So this is all hard plastic and pretty basic, but the plus side to that is it's really easy to keep clean. Obviously, you're limited in space in a smaller car, and that means some slightly annoying things. I think that's a fairly standard size small bottle of water. As you can see, these cup holders wouldn't permit anything by way of a decent sized cup. That's just a bit bothersome. It's not the end of the world, though. It's quite a nice touch that there is a movable armrest here, which just adds a little bit to your comfort while you're using this vehicle. It does its job, it looks clean, it's efficient, and overall, I think a nice job with the central console. It's a small car, yes, but can you still realistically fit human beings into the back of it? Well, okay, let's start with getting into the car. I have to say, because of that nice roofline and because of the design of the vehicle, getting in and out of the rear of this car is actually not that straightforward. As you can see, I've got a quite narrow aperture, and it wasn't the easiest, almost graceful way to get in. Now, why am I mentioning that? If you're thinking you might have to use this to transport people with any ability challenges around in, it's not the easiest thing in the world. I have really short legs, and as you can see, it's not the most easy car to get in and out of the back of. Now, I suspect that isn't remotely a problem for the vast majority of customers, because probably the majority of people sitting back here will be children, and for them, this is absolutely perfect. Now, if you need to transport adults, there are some nice design touches. Look at the way the back of this seat has been sculpted in order to provide me with the maximum amount of legroom I can possibly have. And you can really see what a smart piece of design that is. If I follow the shoulder line of this seat down, you can immediately see, without that really clever designing of the seat, I'm really not comfortable back here at all. This seat in front is set for Jonas. He is over 6 feet, and he's very comfortable driving around in this. So this is a very realistic display of the kind of leg space you can expect back here. Headroom, well, it's the same story as the legs. It's okay, it works. Best is for kids, but if you have to put adults back here, they're going to be fine as long as they're 6 foot or less. Over 6 feet, it's not going to be the best experience you ever had. But you know what? It's not going to be the worst either. And I will say, these rear seats are as well thought through and well delivered as the front ones are. they're really, really comfortable. And for a rear seat experience, that's genuinely very pleasing. I also really like that for a small car, they had the foresight to fit 2 USB charge points. The most likely customers for those are children. It's really nice that they actually have fitted those and given them something at this price point that they can utilize. Now, on top of that, of course, we have seats that fold flat to allow us access to the rear, and they come down in a 60-40 configuration. As you can see here, they actually fold really pleasingly flat. A lot of the work that they've done from an engineering standpoint on this car of maximizing the return on the way the materials in the car interact are really paying off. If you compare this to how cars used to operate, everything here just makes you feel immensely satisfied with the work that's taken place and the way that it's all delivered. So, maybe nothing to set your world on fire. It's not a magic car after all. It doesn't have limitless space, but the space that there is and the materials that have been used have really been well executed. So, if I got a lift round in the back of one of these, I'd be very happy with that, as long as we didn't have to go too far. Let's see if there's actually room to put anything in the back. Well, we are not making use of this boot space in order to store batteries because of the configuration of the batteries in here, and that means we have a nice ample amount of room, just the same as the internal combustion engines, around about 270 litres of load space or thereabout. Very standard, very basic. The only thing I think is a bit of an omission that they might have considered would have been a variable shelf here to give us something closer to even load height. I don't know if that will be an option or if that's something that can come later. I find it a really good addition in smaller cars. If you look underneath, you can see that we have very limited extra room indeed, which does make me wonder a little bit whereabouts I'm going to keep my charging cable. Now, obviously, I can just throw it into the back, but it's always nice when there is a bespoke spot for that, so it doesn't take up any of my load room. So, perfectly serviceable, perfectly usable. I think I would have liked a little bit more design back here. But when you put the seats down, then that space really opens up. And all of a sudden we change from having 270 all the way up to over 1,000 litres of load. So again, for a small car, that's absolutely superb. There's so much that I can fit in the back here. But again, if we have found a way of integrating some type of shelf system here, then we would have a smoother load rather than a big lip here and a big lip to the load back here. Let's take a look and see what's under the hood. Well, no gas struts for us here. But what there is an awful lot of very nice technology. Now, this has a power output of something around about 140 horsepower. So that will take you from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in about 8.1 seconds. And the 50 kilowatt hour batteries, I should say, should give you an effective range of around about optimally 330 kilometers. We'll look into that a little bit more when we do the driving. Well, now it's time to actually take the car out and see what the driving experience can deliver. If you haven't had a chance to check out our review of the Electric 208, which shares the platform with this car, I highly recommend you go and take a look at that. The driving experience should be similar, but a little bit different as well. It's always interesting to see what different manufacturers' approach to similar chassis are. So, let's take the car out on the road and see how it feels. Well, the nice thing about the latest range of fully electric cars that are now finally coming up on the market is that they are capable of delivering something that their internal combustion engine colleagues simply can't. And that is more power and acceleration. And that delivers a 0 to 100 kilometers per hour acceleration of around about 8.1 seconds. Very nice indeed for a small car. The best that the internal combustion engine can deliver is about 8.7. So, pretty good job at getting a comparison. That engine's 130, this has a slightly more powerful output, but you really do feel that little extra bit of kick when it comes to driving around town or taking these out on the highway. So if you're used to the experience of driving the new Corsa, you'll be aware that a lot of refinement has already been put into this car. It feels a lot more sporty and agile than the predecessor right from the get-go. But clearly, this is a different proposition. Why? Well, in a standard Corsa, you're looking at a curb weight of around about 1,000 kilograms, something like that. Here we have 1,580 kilograms. That is quite a significant difference. If you've had the experience of driving the new Corsa, you will already have noticed that it's much more sporty and much more agile in its handling than what went before. But this is a different challenge entirely. Why? Well, it's the same platform, but whereas a standard Corsa is around about 1,000 kilograms in weight, this one, because of the batteries of course, comes in at around about 1,580. Well, clearly that's going to present a significant challenge in terms of how you approach the dynamics of this vehicle. So, to start with, there is 30% more torsional stiffness in this car than a standard Corsa. Not only that, but the center of gravity is around about 6 centimeters lower on this car than a standard Corsa. So clearly, there are a lot of adjustments required to the whole way in which this car behaves in order to deliver a driving experience that's firstly satisfactory and secondly is recognizable to the standard user. Well, first impressions, really nice job. I really like this platform. As you may or may not know, it's the same one that's used for the 208, and clearly the advantage is that it works very nicely with the newer technology. Chassis design has come on so much in the past few years. So much more is able to be achieved with less, and the cost effectiveness keeps getting better. So in terms of sitting behind the wheel of this car and driving it, I really think you're going to be very pleasantly surprised. So, driving position, let's start off with that. Well, I have quite a long torso as you can see, but I have lots of spare room above my head. This seat's set as low as it will go to accommodate my long torso, but I'm really comfortable here, so I can tell you this car is going to be great for anyone up to around about, 6'1", 6'2". I've got a good 3 inches of space above my head, so it will accommodate surprisingly large people. Funnily enough, I don't know if you have yet seen that Peugeot 208 clip, but you will have heard me raving about their seat design. It's really, really great. Some of the guys at Opel looked a little bit hurt when I told them that, because they are very, very enthusiastic about the redesign of this seat, which has been done specifically for this car to give it as much comfort. They say it's a sportier dynamic. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to go along with that, but what I can say is I'm delighted by the seat. I really liked the 208 seat so much. Honestly, I was expecting to be a little bit disappointed when it came to driving this car, but not a bit of it. It's supportive, it's comfortable. It does feel a little bit sporty, but I'm not held particularly closely. This is not a car for throwing into corners at high speed anywhere, especially not with that extra weight. But I feel really happy and comfortable. Jonas, is it nice as a passenger?
Yeah.
Great. So road position, really good. You have a nice perspective over the front of that compass design on the bonnet. The car feels very much wrapped around you, so you immediately get a strong sense of space. Overall visibility, nice. That B-pillar, although it's big, doesn't take up too much of your visual room. So you get exactly what you want from a small car, which is a very strong sense of where everything is, where you are within the vehicle, and that you are absolutely within the center of the driving experience. Now, Opel say that they designed the entire car around the driver experience. I always found that, to be honest, a little bit of a redundant statement. I've never yet sat with a manufacturer who explained to me that they didn't prioritize the driving experience in the design of their car. But it's really critical in a small car because you have that much less to work with. So the two things I'm always looking for in a car of this size and profile, it has to be fun to drive. It has to be, and it has to be agile and nippy. Hands down, easily delivered, really great. Given the fact that the weight of this vehicle is 50% extra on top of what you're already expecting, you don't feel that within the drive, and that brings us onto the steering. Really, really pleasing balance between agility and weight. For a while in car design, there was a tendency to put too light a steering emphasis into the power steering option on a car. It really didn't give you the feeling that you had direct contact with the wheels or the overall driving experience. I'm really happy to say that's more or less a thing of the past now. This is very nicely delivered indeed. You're going to be very happy driving around in this. There's enough weight to make you feel confident, but enough flexibility to make you feel agile. And that goes right throughout your driving experience. Now, interestingly, this car comes equipped with 3 different driving modes. You can have standard, you can have eco, or you can have sport. What changes when you go through those modes? Well, theoretically, the steering becomes a little bit more responsive and agile. The power becomes a little bit more responsive as well, but they are keen to point out that if you put your foot down, even in eco mode, suddenly all of the power is instantly available to you. So if you want to drive the car at its most efficient, you can, but then if you need the power, it's there for when you need it. In day-to-day and everyday usage, what difference does it practically make? Well, if you change the driving modes, which I can do with this handy button just behind the gear shifter, I know I still call it that. If I change this now, we're currently in eco, let's put it in sport. The pedal mapping is definitely noticeably different. This is clearly where the most fun is going to be had driving this car. And the steering? Definitely more responsive. The fun factor of driving this just went up significantly. That's really pleasing. In terms of what that does to your efficiency, well, the stated efficiency for this vehicle with its 50 kilowatt battery is a range of 330 kilometers. Well, like all electric cars. Although it's a WLTP figure, which means it's much better than their stated figures used to be, there's still a little bit of wishful thinking in it. We currently have a range of 230 kilometers. We certainly haven't been driving around like crazy people, but we absolutely haven't done 100 kilometers of driving. So it's a realistic real world usage. If you really want to have fun with this car, you're going to be able to expect a range of about 200. Bearing in mind, there's a lot of whistles and bells that can be switched off. If you want to drive it at its most efficient, you can do a lot better. So I would imagine a standard customer for this car is going to spend most of their time in eco and then just flip it on to sport when they really want to enjoy it. It seems like it might not be that much of a feature given that you're not radically changing how the car handles. But you know what? It's really pleasing. For most of the time, eco, so you get the best out of the car's performance, but then every now and then, yeah, let's put it in sport. So here we are back in eco again. That's the standard acceleration. Bearing in mind, if I punch down, suddenly I have everything. The standard acceleration is not bad at all. If you look at some of the weaker internal combustion engines, I think the power delivery is probably actually pretty comparable even with it in eco. But that's not the only thing you can do with this car to affect the way that it drives and handles. There are 2 recuperation modes. Well, D is the standard, and if you have it in D, then you will get a recuperation load, and that's regenerating power from braking that delivers you the maximum amount of driving pleasure, so it should be most familiar in regular car usage. If you push the back on the gear selector, you will change your driving modes to the next one down, and when you're in B, the recuperation is maximized, so you can recognize that. If I give the car a little bit of a boost here and then let go, the deceleration rate, which is the rate at which the car is recuperating energy, has more or less doubled. So it's definitely the best way to drive this car to get the maximum out of the range, but also it's the least pleasurable driving experience. What I can tell you is the technology has come on so far in the past 5 years that driving this car with its highest regeneration state is as painless as it used to be driving an electric car in its least regenerative state. I hope that makes sense to you. basically it's come on a long way. So although if I take you straight out of an internal combustion engine and put you straight into here, in that B mode, you'll say, I don't know about that. The adjustment curve is really very small, and for the vast majority of ownership of this vehicle, this is exactly how you'll be driving the car. In eco mode, in B. But when you put it back in D again, and then you change the mode back into sport, well, suddenly it gets exciting quite quickly. Okay, exciting for a small car, let's be realistic. But as you've probably gathered, I'm a really big fan of these smaller electric cars, because although the pricing isn't quite where I'd like it to be, it's getting there. So we're really starting to see what the future of driving can realistically look like. And you know what? If this car from Opel is anything to go by, I think it looks pretty good. So you'll be aware when we did our look around at the car that this car has slightly different wheels to the standard Corsa, and obviously that's in order to maximize the amount of efficiency in terms of the drive. So I haven't really noticed a significant difference in terms of what that does to road noise. Generally, I would have to say that they've done a really nice job with the sound insulation here. It's enough to make you feel comfortable, and I'm just gonna see if we can get this car up a little bit faster. First of all, let's enjoy that acceleration. That's nice. You know what, I think that's absolutely the sweet spot of how much power I would want in a vehicle this size and this type. 8.1 seconds, I think, is right on the money. Not too fast, not too slow, and it feels just perfect. So, road noise. Currently going 85 kilometers per hour, and I think, as you can hear, the balance again is just right. I'm not really experiencing anything that's making me uncomfortable, but you are aware that because of those wheels, I would guess, combined with the tires, there is a little bit more road noise than maybe would be ideal, but it's nothing that you need to get distressed about. The suspension has been tweaked, obviously, for the extra weight. That hasn't changed the comfort of this car at all. That lower center of gravity makes this car feel really solid on the road and very nicely positioned. Now, talking of which, brand new feature for the car. Not entirely sure I understand how much value it's going to be, but I think it's worth mentioning. When you use the cruise control as well as lane assist, there is now a feature which you can switch on. It's a button just in the middle of the console, which will allow you to lock your position within a lane. So if you're right in the middle, the car will stay in the middle. If you veer slightly to the left, it stays there. To the right. I can see maybe the benefit of that if you're in roadworks. The concern I always have with those systems is that if you rely on them too much, when I drive through roadworks, I regularly see road markings because of the roadworks that would make it very challenging for even the most intelligent system to manage to understand really what is going on. So it's a nice feature. I don't know how useful it's going to be. Earlier on, when we tried out the lane control, it was okay, but honestly, to get the best out of lane assist, you need those bigger, heavier cars with more powerful torque being applied to the steering. In a smaller car, it's fine. It just doesn't feel like it's a completely native thing. So although Opel are jumping up and down and saying this is a great feature to have, for me personally, you know what? I think that the adaptive cruise control is already doing a pretty nice job. I don't need to get too upset about that. But I will say, I think using the cruise controls here and the display controls here does take a little bit of adjustment to. I think they could have made a slightly cleaner job of organizing these. For me, instinctively and naturally, the spot that I want cruise control off and on is right in the middle, where for no reason I can fully understand is the button to turn on the heated steering wheel. It just feels a little bit unnatural to me. All of these controls are for either speed, cruise control, distance from car in front, speed limiter. The on-off button for me logically sits in the middle. Maybe I'm being picky. I do like the way that the speed up, speed down are integrated on the left, and the memory function is nice. So, all in all, driving experience on this car, pretty much 2 thumbs up. really like when the manufacturers do this. It offers us the opportunity to really get a good sense of what's happening underneath the skin of the car. The main difference for me between electric platforms and internal combustion engines is that you can really have a very good look around an internal combustion engine to understand what's happening. With the new electric platform, so much of it is built into the subframe of the car itself, it's almost impossible to be able to have a good look to see what's going on. So this then is a completely stripped down version of the power management system, which allows you to see what is happening underneath the floor of your car. So 216 cells in 18 separate modules. This whole system will be supplied by Opel with an 8-year or 160,000 kilometer mile guarantee. And not only that, but they also offer something called a battery health check. Obviously, a big concern with people buying electric vehicles is how the residual value works. So with this system in place, you can take your car and have the battery certified at any stage of your ownership, which means that when you sell it on, whoever's buying it next has a good understanding of exactly what they're getting and the condition that it's in. So I think that's a nice service to be able to offer. As you can see, the configuration is 2 of these units that have been placed into the central tunnel. So traditionally, where we would have had a drive shaft running the length of the car, this is under the front seat of the vehicle. This is where the rear seat's passenger feet go. And this, the largest part of the array, is immediately underneath the back seat. So you have almost no impact on the internal space of this vehicle. The platform has been designed so that the internals of the car represent exactly the same way whether you go with internal combustion or whether you go with electric. And that makes all the difference in the world to its usability as a vehicle. At its most basic level, this is a standard charging unit that you can get to go with your e-Corsa that will plug into a standard wall outlet. What does that mean? Well, they had a nice way of explaining that to us. It means if you charge for an hour on a standard wall outlet, you should get approximately 10 kilometers of driving range on your car. So you can do the math. If you want 330 kilometers of full range, it's going to take a while to charge it up. But this is where I think all of us need to improve our knowledge and the way that we think about using cars. You're not standardly using 330 kilometers of range every day. So most days when you plug in at home, it should be a matter of topping up your battery and managing your usage rather than the way we use our internal combustion engines, which is to drain them completely and then refill them. So this is the entrance level, the most basic model. Moving up, if you have a bit more flexibility, you can get one of these. And this is called a green up system. What that means is there's a bit more intelligent thinking happening within the system, so it will maximize the amount of power that is available to it based on what you have it plugged into. Some sockets in your house will be able to provide more power than others. Easiest way I can describe that, if you think about your cooker at home, usually it has a much thicker cable and it's plugged in differently to anything else because its power drain is greater. So you do usually within your home network have the capacity to supply more power where it's available. So that's what this system does. It should provide you what you need at around about twice the rate. So 20 kilometers for every hour worth of charging, standardly. Obviously, there's some flexibility built in there. This is what Opel are most excited about. This is their approach to offering a one-size-fits-all solution. Now, it is not bundled with the car. You can buy this, it's going to cost over €700, but I think what they feel is that this offers the best compromise between the systems that you can use and the flexibility of not needing to have a massive quantity of stuff. This does actually work really well in terms of your ability to take the car traveling, because it means whatever you encounter, you have a solution. As you can see, all of these sockets are interchangeable with the charging unit here. So you literally pick what you want to plug into, plug on the adapter, and then you're good to go. So for flexibility, for space, and their point of view is, well, you know, 700 is not that much money. Well, I kind of think it is. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's not good value, but at the end of the day, if I've just paid nearly 30,000 euro for a car, having to spend almost another 1,000 on a charging cable, well, I'm very interested to see what the uptake is. But if you can justify the expense, it's nice that they do offer a one option fits all. So that's for tapping into standard or other power sources. This is what's going to happen when you want to charge at home. You can have a wall box fitted, and depending on your market, where you live and how it works, often this will be bundled in with the purchase price, or there might be extra government incentives to have this fitted in your home. So 3 different options here. This is the standard one, and this is going to allow you to charge your vehicle in a pretty straightforward way, but it's not intelligent. So in order to dictate how and when your vehicle charges, you'll be able to do that through the Opel app that you can get with this car that allows you to manage charging time, so you can take advantage of the cheapest electricity where you live, but also do things like pre-warm your car. You can do that using the app, but that intelligence is in the car and in the app and not in the box. Over here, there are now intelligent wall boxes, and although this might sound like overkill, the practical application of this, which is really good, is that in your life, if you need to understand which parts of your energy usage you're billing back to either your work or your clients if you're self-employed, or simply managing your household finances, it's really great, the idea that you can actually have a piece of equipment that will tell you exactly how much you're spending on your car and when and how you consume that power. Why the 2 different models? Well, this only serves to further demonstrate the complexity between the markets. In France, it's not legal in all places to have this cable attached to the wall box. So this is a unit that doesn't have the cable attached, which satisfies the regulatory requirements in France. Well, that about does it for our look at the Corsa E. So what do we think about it? Well, let's deal with the platform first. I really like the hard work that Opel have put in to trying to make their presentation of electric power as being something reasonable, that's for everyone, that's adaptable and can work with you wherever you live, in as easy to digest and approach a format as possible. The new charging solutions are nice, the new approach to the charging solutions are good. The commitment that's now in existence to build and develop those networks across the whole of Europe and then of course the globe are really starting to make headway. There really is no hiding it. This is still a very new technology, which means realistically we're beyond the early adopter phase, but it's still not going to be as straightforward as it is to own a petrol car, say. But we are approaching a territory in which it will be getting there. So at the moment, there's still a little bit of adjustment on the part of the consumer required in order to get the full electric experience down, a learning curve, if you will, before owning one of these vehicles is just as straightforward as owning a petrol one. I'm impressed to see the moves that have been made in that direction. So as long as you're ready to deal with that still being something a bit more of a challenge than maybe the manufacturers would like it to be right now, I really don't think you're going to find a lot to quibble with on that score. Further to that, battery performance is now better than it's ever been. So for a small car like this and average distance usage, bearing in mind a lot of research has been done here, most people just don't use their cars that much. So range anxiety really can be a thing of the past. And when you factor in things like the app's ability to be able to interact with how you use power, when you use power, how to more efficiently use your vehicle, those things should only get easier through time. However, you can't get round the fact of the pricing. This car, standardly without incentives, is on the market just below 30,000 euro. Now that's not with nothing, it does come nicely equipped, but a base entrance price on a standard Corsa is 14, and that's really where part of the problem lies. The fact is, at 14,000, it's massively available to a wide range of people, and although most people spend significantly more because they spec up their car, they still could get one for 14,000. It is a big leap from 14 to 30, and there is an awful lot of very good internal combustion engine competition once you start looking at that price point. However, and this is where I have massive sympathy with the manufacturers, that picture changes radically depending on which market you live in, which government is in power, and which incentives are running this week, next week, last week, the week after. You get the idea. It's really not a straightforward purchase in the way if you just walk into an Opel showroom and say, yeah, just give me a 130 horsepower petrol engine Corsa, that's great. It standardly is. So, still some flexibility required on the part of the purchaser, still an understanding that it is going to be a more expensive purchase. And if you have the money to spread out that cost over money that you've saved in the lifetime of the vehicle, in power consumption, but also in servicing and parts, well, then it can now start to make economic sense. But that doesn't change the fact that you still need the money in the first place. So, those are all of the platform issues. Now let's talk about the car. I think this car is absolutely great. It gives me as much pleasure to say that as it did when I tried the electric 208. But, and I have to be completely honest here, when I drove the electric 208, I felt like I was sitting in a bit of the future. When I drive this car, and I don't concern myself with anything other than the drive, I feel exactly the same way. It handles great. I like the styling. I think they've kept a huge amount of Opel characteristics in it overall, but made it look young, funky, fresh, dynamic. You'd be perfectly happy to pull up with this car anywhere. And I also like the fact that it sits on the same platform, the same level, the same way as the other cars within its sector. I think that's a big, bold step forwards. But, and for me, it is a significant but, I think that the way that the technology has been integrated into the driver experience really still needs some work. There are some huge step forwards in this car and this platform overall. To me, the ergonomic driver experience definitely still needs more updating. Now, as more data comes in and more refreshes are possible, and hopefully as battery production gets cheaper, that should all be around the corner, but that's not going to happen next week. This car is what's coming next week. Next week or thereabouts, as you understand. And because of that, I would have liked to have seen something just a little bit more challenging, modern and innovative in terms of design. But that is very much my taste. Other people might be screaming at their screen right now, I love it! And please do tell us if you're one of those people. So design great, drive fantastic, driver experience, seating position, excellent. Technology integration, I think could maybe use a bit more work. But overall, if this is a glimpse of the future, then the future looks bright. Orange, it turns out. If you have any questions or comments, please pop them below. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope we'll see you all again soon.